You're at the bottom of a stone stairwell, and the air changes first. It goes damp, metallic, and wrong, like wet pennies and old blood. Your torchlight wobbles across iron rings in the wall, across splintered wood stained too dark to be smoke, across a pulley that looks ordinary, until you notice the rope is polished smooth from use. Someone above you is praying fast, the way people pray when they can hear their own heartbeat. Then the screaming starts. Not loud at first, but controlled, like the body is trying to bargain with the pain by rationing it. In this place, suffering isn't an accident. It's engineered. It's measured. It's repeated until the person inside the pain becomes something smaller than a person, and everyone watching learns the same lesson. Your body belongs to the law now, and the law can take it apart without killing you. Now pull back with me, because the dungeon is not a fantasy set, and the devices are not props from horror films. Across medieval Europe, especially from the late 1200s into the 1500s and beyond, courts, bishops' officials, city magistrates, and royal investigators developed systems where torture could be framed as procedure, not chaos. Not rage, procedure. There were rules for when it could begin, rules for who could authorize it, rules for how confession had to be repeated afterward, freely, and rules, most chilling of all, about avoiding death too soon. They wanted the living body because the living body can speak, and the spoken words can become a verdict. What makes this era so haunting isn't just the pain, it's the contradiction. The same society that built cathedrals of light also built instruments of ruin. The same law that promised order also staged suffering as public proof of justice. And once you understand how these devices worked on flesh, on nerves, on breath, you start to see the real question hiding underneath the iron. How did cruelty become administration? And how did people learn to look at a broken human being and call it righteousness? Before we go deeper, tell me where you're watching from, city or country. It honestly amazes me that these centuries-old stories reach people everywhere, all at once. There is a figure historians meet again and again, not always by name, sometimes only as the accused, the prisoner, the heretic, the thief. But to keep our footing in this darkness, we will hold on to two anchors, a victim and a witness. The victim is a young artisan, someone whose hands have always been his livelihood, whose shoulders were built for carrying and shaping and lifting. The witness is a clerk, a man trained to write clean lines on parchment, a man whose job is to turn screams into sentences. He doesn't swing the hammer. He doesn't turn the crank. He just records. And that is how the horror survives time. The first lesson of medieval torture is that the body can be destroyed in pieces, and the person can remain alive long enough to understand every piece being taken. The people who designed these methods learned anatomy, the way a butcher learns it, by practice. They didn't need Latin names for nerves to discover where pain blooms hottest. They didn't need modern physiology to learn that the shoulder will surrender before the heart does. They didn't need antibiotics to know infection would arrive later like a second execution, quiet and inevitable, if the victim didn't confess fast enough to earn mercy. It begins with restraint, because restraint is the foundation of everything that follows. The artisan is brought in with wrists tied. In some towns, there is a ritual to it, the reading of accusations, the warning to tell the truth, the claim that the court seeks the soul's salvation. Those words matter, not because they comfort him, but because they transform what happens next into something officials can live with. They can say, "We did not torture, we questioned." They can say, "We did not mutilate, we urged confession." The language is the first device. Then they take him to the rope. It might be a beam in the ceiling, a pulley, a hook. It doesn't look like an invention. It looks like a tool you'd use to lift sacks of grain. That's what makes it terrifying. The line between labor and torment is one knot. His hands are tied behind his back, and the rope runs upward. The clerk stands near a table. He dips his pen. The torturer tests the tension in the rope with a calm, almost bored movement, like a man checking a horse's tack. The artisan's breathing changes because the body recognizes a threshold before the mind can name it. When they lift him, the pain begins as strain. Muscles stretch, the joints resist. There is still hope at this stage, hope that it will stop, hope that the body can bear it. But then the shoulders start to migrate. The human shoulder is a miracle and a weakness. It gives you range, reach, the ability to work. It is also a shallow socket built for movement, not for being pulled upward behind the back. A little higher, and the joint begins to unseat. The artisan's face loses its color. His mouth opens, not to scream yet, but to breathe through shock. And then it happens, the first dislocation. Not a clean snap like a movie. It's a wet, sliding betrayal inside the body. The head of the arm bone slips out of place, and suddenly everything that used to be aligned is wrong. Pain shoots not just from the joint, but down the arm, into the hand, like lightning searching for an exit. The body tries to protect itself by tensing, and the tensing makes it worse. The torturer doesn't need to keep lifting to increase agony. They can hold him there. They can let his own weight become the blade. They can speak to him calmly while his arms begin to go numb. That numbness is not mercy, it's damage. Nerves being stretched and compressed until they stop transmitting sensation normally. The artisan may beg, he may pray, he may curse. The clerk writes something like, "He persists in denial." Here comes the first moral twist, and it's the kind that sickens you because it's practical. In many legal cultures of the time, a confession gained under torture might not be enough on its own. It often had to be repeated later without torture to be valid. So the system creates a perversity. They want him alive and conscious enough to speak afterward, but broken enough to comply. Torture becomes calibrated. The goal is not death. The goal is submission that can be translated into paperwork. They lower him. The rope relaxes. For a fraction of a second, he thinks it's over. But relief is used like a lever. Because the moment the joints settle even slightly, still dislocated, still screaming, but no longer being actively pulled, the mind floods with gratitude for the smallest reduction in pain. The torturer asks the question again. A name, a place, an accomplice, a pact, a theft, a heresy. The artisan shakes his head, and the rope tightens again. Sometimes they add a refinement, a controlled drop, not enough to break the neck, just enough for the body to jerk. That jerk can tear ligaments, shred the soft stabilizers inside the shoulder, and stretch nerve bundles until the hand tingles, then burns, then goes dead. You can survive this and still never lift your arm again. You can survive this and still be unable to work, unable to fight, unable to hug your child without flinching. Death would be a door. This is a corridor with no end. The clerk's role is crucial because writing turns violence into legitimacy. He notes the questions. He notes the answers. He notes the obstinacy. Somewhere outside, a town continues living. Bread is baked. Bells ring. A child laughs in a street. And beneath that normal life, a man is being pulled apart inch by inch. That separation between ordinary existence and controlled cruelty is the second device. It allows a community to keep functioning while horror happens in its basement. Once the shoulders have taught their lesson, the body offers other joints, other weak negotiations. The rack, whether in the iconic form people imagine or in simpler frames used in smaller jurisdictions, works on a principle so brutal it almost feels abstract. Lengthen the body past its design. The artisan is strapped at wrists and ankles. The frame is cold under him. Leather bites skin. The torturer turns a handle. At first, the movement is subtle, like someone tightening a belt. The artisan's hips tense. His back arches instinctively to protect the spine. He tries to inhale, but breath catches because the muscles along the ribs are being stretched too, and breathing is movement. The handle turns again. This time the joints begin their protest. Ankles strain, knees pull, hips, deep, strong joints built to carry weight, start to feel like they are being pried open from the inside. You can picture it, the body as a bridge, and the rope as the force trying to tear the bridge from both ends. Here is the hidden rule that appears in records and manuals. Many torturers knew the difference between injuring and killing, not because they were merciful, but because death could ruin a case. A dead body can't repeat a confession. A dead body can't be paraded as an example. So they watched for certain signs: the slackness of unconsciousness, the change in breathing, the color of lips, the way the eyes stopped tracking. They paused, not out of pity, but out of strategy. As tension increases, shoulders can dislocate again, this time forward. Hips can partially displace. Fingers can go numb from stretching, and the spine, quietly, gradually, becomes the fuse. The vertebrae are stacked like stones, and between them are discs that allow flexibility. Under sustained traction, those discs are strained, and nerves that exit between vertebrae can be pinched. That's when sensations change. Pain becomes burning, or it becomes absence. A sudden loss of feeling in the toes can be more terrifying than pain, because it whispers the truth. Something is breaking that won't heal. The artisan might feel his legs stop responding the way they always have. He might try to move a foot and discover it is no longer fully his. He might hear a sound. Some accounts describe pops and cracks. But even if nothing snaps, the body can still be catastrophically damaged without dramatic noise. Tendons fray, muscles tear microscopically, blood vessels are stressed. Then the torturer asks again, always again. And the question is never only about facts, it is about control. Because once the body learns that denial equals the crank turning, truth becomes secondary. The artisan begins to understand that the easiest way to stop the handle is to give the interrogator what he wants, whether it happened or not. That is why torture produces confessions that read like nightmares. Not because nightmares are true, but because nightmares are what the mind offers when it is being hunted inside its own skin. By now the clerk's page is filling. He may not write the screams. He writes the responses. He writes the names. He writes the words, freely confessed, later, when the artisan is dragged out, shaking, forced to repeat what he said while under the crank. The ink dries. The town receives a clean narrative. Guilt proven. Justice served. But medieval torture didn't rely on one grand instrument alone. Some of the most devastating methods were small, portable, almost casual. Finger screws, toe crushers, clamps, devices that reduce a person's world to a single concentrated point of pain. The artisan is already exhausted. His shoulders are ruined. His back feels like it has been stretched thin. Now they take his hand, the very thing that makes him who he is. The screw is turned. At first it's pressure, like a hard grip. Then the nail bed begins to throb. Then the pain sharpens into a bright, focused blaze that wipes everything else from the mind. Fingertips are dense with nerve endings. That's why they guide delicate work, and that's why they are perfect targets for torture. The screw turns again, and the nail feels like it is being pushed backward into the finger. Skin splits. A tiny bone can crack with a sound you can barely hear, but you can feel it in the vibration of agony. What happens next is not just pain. It's the future being stolen. Even if he lives, a crushed finger can become stiff, deformed, infected. Tendons can scar. Nerves can misfire. The hand can become a source of constant burning or constant deadness, either way making tools feel alien. You can execute a man and be done, or you can return him to the world unable to earn bread, unable to tie rope, unable to hold a child without a tremor. That is the social dimension of torture. It turns punishment into prolonged poverty. Now the second major contradiction arrives, the one that reveals something rotten at the center of justice. Authorities didn't only punish the guilty, they punished uncertainty. Torture was often used when officials believed they had partial evidence. Not proof, suspicion. The artisan might be there because a neighbor spoke his name under pressure, or because someone needed a scapegoat during plague, famine, war, or religious panic. Torture becomes a machine that amplifies rumor into conviction. The artisan may not even understand what story he is expected to confess to until the interrogators tell him. You met them at night. You swore an oath. You stole the host. You plotted with others. The script is fed to him piece by piece, and the body's need to escape pain makes the mind grasp the offered narrative, like a drowning man grasps driftwood. Then come the burns, controlled fire. Not the mercy of quick flames, but small, repeated applications. A heated iron close to the skin makes the air itself feel hostile. The artisan smells it before it touches him. Hair singes, then skin sizzles, not like cooking meat in a kitchen, but like a living boundary being violated. The pain of a burn is different from a bruise or a cut. It is wide, raw, and lingering. It doesn't end when the iron lifts. It blossoms afterward. It pulses with the heartbeat. And in a medieval cell, filthy straw, unwashed bodies, rusted shackles, burns become invitations. The skin is your shield. Once it's broken, infection doesn't need to work hard. The wound weeps. It swells. Fever can arrive days later, when the court has already moved on. That's the cruelty that lasts beyond the room. Torture can create delayed deaths. Deaths that don't look like executions in the record. The artisan might stagger out alive and die later at home, and the town can tell itself it wasn't the court that killed him. If he survives longer, the next phase targets something deeper than flesh, the nervous system's ability to interpret the world. Beatings to the soles of the feet, pressure near joints, twisting limbs into positions that compress nerves. Methods designed to make pain strange, persistent, untrustworthy. Nerve pain doesn't behave like ordinary injury. It can feel electric. It can flare when nothing touches you. It can turn a gentle brush of cloth into burning. That is the kind of suffering that isolates a survivor, because other people can't see it, and what they can't see, they doubt. Now introduce the witness again, the clerk, because he is also a human being, and that matters. He hears the artisan's voice change over hours and days. Screams become hoarse, words become slurred, breath becomes shallow. The clerk may begin to notice details he can't write. The smell of sweat turning sour. The way urine spreads across straw because the body can't hold it under fear. The way a man stops meeting anyone's eyes because the mind retreats to survive. This is the third curiosity spike, the human decision with consequences. At some point, the clerk, or a judge, or a priest, must decide whether this is still useful, whether the body has been pushed enough, whether the confession is sufficient, whether the next device will be applied. And this decision can hinge on things as petty as politics, reputation, or money. A wealthy prisoner might be tortured differently than a poor one. A famous one might be spared disfigurement for appearances. A nobody might be used as a message because no one important will complain. Torture is not just about cruelty. It is about power, choosing who can be broken publicly. Sleep deprivation comes next. The artisan is dragged up at odd hours, questioned under torchlight that never lets the eyes rest. Standing, kneeling, muscles cramping, trembling, failing. After a day, the mind fogs. After 2, hallucinations emerge. Shadows where none exist, voices folding into each other, memory fracturing. Truth becomes meaningless. Only endurance remains. Pain does not reveal honesty. It reveals desperation. The artisan may confess to theft, heresy, meetings that never happened. The body trades reality for relief. He learns the script quickly because the rope punishes improvisation. If executed, the town sees closure. If released, the punishment lingers. Shoulders fail. Hands cannot grip. Feet burn at night. Sleep becomes a battlefield. Work is agony. Dependent strains love. Neighbors avoid him. His body becomes a warning. The haunting legacy is also in the paperwork. Neat lines describing questioning, confession, repentance, justice. Maybe a note, released, or delivered to execution. Ordinary ink holds extraordinary suffering. Death ends sensation. Torture leaves a living cage. Memories replay, nerves flare. Life continues under the shadow of a rope. The survivor walks in daylight. Marketplace smells of bread and smoke, flinching, because some suffering outlives death itself.